r/AskReddit. Guys of Reddit. What is your worst meeting the dad moment when dating someone new? I had been dating this girl for about 3 to 4 months, and it was time to meet her family. We made arrangements and went over for dinner. He was nothing short of a fucking prisoner. I still refer to him as the prisoner. The entire night he barely spoke, and when he did it was only after being directly prompted by his wife or daughters, and it was always one-word answers. The entire dinner was them making jokes at his expense, making fun of him, while simultaneously spilling the beans on intimate personal details of his life. His wife treated him with absolute contempt and disdain, which was translated into how his daughters treated him as well. The only living thing in that house that had any affection for him was the cat. This man spent 30 years working his ass off as a civil engineer to raise a family. His wife never worked a day in her life, before or after him. He put 2 daughters through college, paid their fucking rent, on top of paying for their cars and basically everything else. And they treated him like a malfunctioning robot butler. His eyes were completely dead, like a lion who's been in the zoo too long. It scared the fucking shit out of me, so I broke up with her about a week later. It was like a visit from the ghost of Christmas future. Not the first time I had met the father, but easily the worst moment. I have a long distance relationship. Very long. Like Orlando FL to Istanbul long. There's a story in and of itself. I had recently flown to Turkey to meet her for our semi-annual be in the same country time when her parents found out I was in the country. Now, we aren't some secret lovers, quite the opposite, but if her parents aren't helicopters, they're flying saucers that threaten to abduct her and anybody near her at a moment's notice. Because I was in the city, they took it upon themselves to get a hotel and stay there for 3 nights and impose themselves into her life. The thing is, we are both adults. We had our own plans, and in my last day I had plans to meet a friend of my girlfriend that I had become something of a pen pal with. Then we were going to drink a shit ton of coffee, pull an all-nighter snuggling and doing the thing significant others do on their last night together, then drive out to the airport in the wee hours of the morning to avoid Istanbul traffic on the way to the airport. Ha ha ha. No. My girlfriend's father, convinced she's a paste-eating moron who can't plan anything. He's a logistics manager for military contractor who has a profound ability not to leave work at work, decided to buy us a hotel room much closer to the airport so we wouldn't have to deal with traffic, regardless of any plans we had. After a 2-hour argument it's decided that we are taking this hotel because he already paid for it, and he proceeds to drive us from the Asian side of this mega city to the European side so we can check into the hotel we don't want to be in. But that's not all. He then asks what we want to do for the rest of the afternoon / do for dinner, to which we both explain, for the 4th time, we had dinner plans with somebody else on the other fucking side of the city. And to a lesser extent her mother, proceeds to throw a passive-aggressive hisser fit as he finally yields to drive us back, because we can at least spend time together on the drive. I didn't realize how terminal those words would prove. Not 15 minutes into the drive he takes a weird detour to go to a shop and get some water. He's stalling. Then we see the clock. 4 PM, 1600 hours for you international people. It is the height of Istanbul traffic. This is a city with a larger population than the entire nation of Greece that has only recently began an automobile familiarity close to what the US has mastered. This is New York traffic with Florida level drivers. A godless wasteland that Mad Maximum couldn't survive in because there's nowhere to move. And this guy chooses the longest way back to my girlfriend's apartment to spite us for having other plans. After all of that, the man insists we have dinner because it is now 8 o'clock by the time we finally get to the other side of the city. We finally part ways. I have a truncated meeting with my pen pal, and we have to take the metro back to the European side, conveniently free to the public at the moment, and get a cab back to the hotel. Probably not the worst moment in this thread, but easily the most frustrating time I've spent with any bodice folks. I'm a white guy who dated a Palestinian girl in 1st/2nd year university. I live in Canada and grew up with a huge multitude of people from different backgrounds etc. So I never really thought much about how people might differ in how they handled things. I guess I just figured everyone was kind of the same, more or less. I learned a lot. For the first few months it didn't matter because it was fairly low-key and I just liked spending time with her, so I didn't mind not meeting her family. But eventually I either asked or she told me that she had to keep it secret from them because they would freak out. I was basically like, okay, I'm sure they're traditional, but I'm sure it won't be that bad. Once they meet me and see I'm not a shithead, I'm sure it'll be fine, right? She was just like, I don't think so. Eventually they found out, of course. And freak out they did, her father in particular. It was pretty intense, to say the least. First he freaked out on her and physically abused her a bit. He then called me from her phone and told me if I wanted to be with her, I had to convert to Islam. Then I could buy her a ring and propose to her, at which point I would be allowed to see her every once in a while under his direct supervision. Once we were married, I would be allowed to see her more often, and I'm guessing unsupervised. I was 19 or 20 at this point. It's also worth noting that his daughter was basically your average Canadian girl. She didn't wear a hijab or anything, and had drank alcohol a few times before, and quite enjoyed it. In any case, her and I decided that was pretty fucked, and neither of us was down, though we did want to stay dating. So we did. That's when shit really hit the fan. He really ramped up the physical abuse, even literally torturing her, choking her out with a phone cord while interrogating her, at one point to get information about me, in particular what had we done sexually. We had been having sex, and I'm pretty sure he had access to her phone, records/texts, since he paid for her phone, so I'm pretty sure he put 2 and 2 together. He wanted her to get a virginity test. Eventually, she had enough and decided it was time to leave, so she left to stay with me. This really ramped shit up even more. He threatened to kill me and her. He threatened to kill her brother and himself. He threatened to kill her pet rabbit. He said he would abuse her younger brother, who she loved more than anything. Her mother said some of the most foul shit I have ever seen to her. She was told she would be completely disowned from her family, of course, which was harsh for her, since it was important. She had something like 46 first cousins. Her Muslim girlfriends who she had grown up with berated the fuck out of her constantly, called her a disgusting whore. I was a white piece of shit. I would certainly burn in hell. They didn't really know me, and though I was a bit of a shithead in high school, I was doing well in university and had cleaned up my act. But regardless, I was basically subhuman and ruining her, and she was a backstabbing whore of a daughter to her father. So after a few days, her uncle reached out to her and was much more understanding and nice. I spoke with him as well, and he was extremely reasonable and said the best thing would be to let things calm down. She could stay with him in the meantime and he would calm her dad down and make sure he didn't do anything crazy, like kill us. It seemed like a good option, so that's what we did. It was a really stressful time. Her father still forced her to go get her virginity checked. She actually got a doctor to do it, i.e. she went in the room with the doctor. The doctor, who was a woman, said alright, so what do you want me to tell them, cause this is fucked, and she was magically a virgin again. She eventually returned home. Shit started to get crazy again. More threats, more psychotic bullshit. She ended up needing to have the police escort her out of her house and brought to a woman's shelter, but that place was not at all great, so she left pretty much immediately to come stay with me. It was actually New Year's Eve. I was outside the woman's shelter waiting in the freezing ass cold for nearly an hour right through the new year, and yet it was still an incredibly great time because I was so much less stressed out knowing she was out of that shit and not being abused constantly. When she came out, she had a huge smile on her face and we kissed and walked off into the shitty frozen tundra together. Sometime later, her father showed up at the door of my apartment one morning and my idiot roommate let him in because he didn't really know what was going on. This guy was never usually around and we weren't really friends or anything. So he comes to our room and says, "Hey, someone's here to give mail to. Girlfriend's name." I'm all groggy and like, WTF. "Okay, I'll get it, no worries," and go to the door. I may not even have been wearing a shirt, I can't remember. Still half asleep, I walk over to the doorway, just down a short hallway from my room, and I'm like, "Hi, you have something for her?" He's like, "I have to give it to her directly." Super stern and grilling me hard, but my brain couldn't put two and two together. I go get her and tell her, and she starts freaking witches when I realize who the guy in my doorway is. Now I'm freaking out. How the fuck does this guy know my apartment number? I was on the 12th floor too, so he got let in the building and knew my exact unit number somehow. It wasn't listed in the directory. She goes and talks to him, and I'm waiting around the corner ready to storm this guy if he tries anything, but luckily they just talked briefly and he left. So yeah, I would say meeting that father, half asleep, possibly not wearing a shirt, evidently waking up from sleeping with his daughter who he threatened to kill us all over, is probably my worst meeting the dad moment. Edit. Holy fuck, this blew up. Here's some answers to some of the questions. Sorry I didn't respond to much yet. Inbox got murked, and I left for vacation shortly after writing this. What happened next? Things calmed down, we continued dating, and she lived with me for a while, before getting a spot with roomies. Our relationship had some other issues as well, and over time those caused us a lot of problems. We ended up breaking up around the 2-year point. I haven't talked to her in about 3 years, but last I heard she went back home, and is still dating some other white guy who they approve of, I guess. I can't help but feel like 1, an asshole for causing all that shit and not being with her forever, and 2, for taking all of that shit and breaking the ice for the next person to swoop on in without having to deal with anything. But both of those feelings are foolish when you think about it. The bunny and her brothers were okay. Her younger sister got extremely sanctimonious and extra religious, so that's cool. My now father-in-law is a retired corrections officer, but at the time of this story, he was still working. I met him the first time I picked up my now wife, me 23/her 20 at the time, for a date, and he a genuinely nice guy. Shook hands, no stern talk, just the typical treat her well and have fun. So all is good, or so I think. On our 3rd date, he decides to fuck with me. I pull up to the house, knock, and he answers, since my wife is still getting ready. Now I think about the fill, is he's quite the winnow, something I didn't know at the time, but unless he's hammered you really can't tell he's been drinking. So I come in, and we small talk a bit, nothing out of the ordinary. After about 5 minutes I hear my wife yell she's almost ready, so I stand up to get ready to leave. At this time he walks over, throw his arm around my shoulder and says, "Well, you kids have fun, but just know that anything ever happens to my daughter, my friends can run a lot faster than you." He proceeds to reach into his pocket and drop a .45 round in my hand, pat me on the back and walk away. I just stand there frozen, in my "oh shit, what I have gotten myself into" moment. My wife comes out, yells bye, grabs my hand, and off we go. Needless to say, it was a very interesting car ride to dinner. In the end, he truly was just fucking with me, but he knew it was a father's right to do so as he saw fit. Looking back now, it's a pretty funny story to tell, but at 23, fresh out of college, it was terrifying. So clearly I married this girl, but the best part of this story came years later at the wedding. At the wedding, he gets up to give his father of bride speech. For the most part it normal, super positive, and super supportive. As he's winding down, he walks over to us and finishes his speech in epic fashion. "I wish you all the happiness in the world, but just remember, if you ever hurt my daughter, my friends can always run faster than you." As he proceeds to drop from more .45 rounds in my hand, drops the mic and walks away. Our guests went crazy cheering his speech as I put my head down on the table laughing and holding the ammo up in the air. The photographer has a great picture of this, while my wife is laughing. We've been meaning to get the picture and ammo framed, but we haven't for some reason yet. The best part is the majority of our family and friends never knew about the first half of the story, which I then got to recount several times later throughout the night. My Phil and I have a good laugh about this every now and then. Story from a girl's path, but I'm pretty sure the dude I was dating at the time would say this was his worst meeting the dad moment. It was the early morning hours of my 16th birthday, so like 12 to 1 am. I had been dating this guy for about 2 weeks. He was 5 years older than me. Yes, I know, creepy, etc. And he was dropping me off at my house after getting dinner at Jeffrey's. Lol. My curfew was 12 am, so me being the 16y/o genius I was, decided that if we were making out in his car in the driveway, that technically meant I was not breaking curfew because I was home. I was kind of a shit. This was in the early days of cell phones, so I had just gotten one, and I get an incoming call from my dad at around 12:30 am from the house phone. He's obviously angry because he thinks I'm not home yet. Where are you? In the driveway, Dad, I said, all cheery at how amazingly my idea was going to work. He immediately hangs up, and I know shit is about to go down. I say my goodbyes, get out of the car, and start booking it to the front door. On the way there I run into my dad, in his boxers, hair all messed up, obviously had just woken up, and his face is very red. He just looks right at me and goes, "Fuck you." Also more confirmation that shit was about to go down, cause he had never said that to me, even when I was being the shittiest of shits. The guy didn't even have time to back out of the driveway, so my dad walks up to his car door, flings it open, and goes, "What makes you think you can keep my daughter out this late?" He just stares at him in utter terror as his answer. Then he proceeds to say, "I don't want to see you again. At the earliest. September." It was late July. Then slammed the door and silently went back inside and went to sleep. My favorite part was, I guess he reasoned with himself when making his threat and decided that he'd be okay with seeing him in September, I guess. When I went to meet my wife's parents for the first time overseas, she told me a few weeks earlier that he worked in the government in the National Security Department. They didn't know what he does, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't want them to know either. Fuck me. So I land after a 14-hour flight, dazed and confused, changed into a suit that was wrinkled during the flight in the airport bathroom, and make my way over to their home. They made a reservation to a seafood restaurant specializing in blowfish. All I could think about is the Simpsons episode with Homer almost dying after eating blowfish. We talk before the food comes out, and things are going well. Usually parents love me, so it goes as expected. The father orders, and I'm sweating bullets, because he orders the blowfish. After 15 minutes, the meal comes out, and I'm relieved to see that the fish is family style on one big plate. But just in case, when I scoop my portion, her parents wanted to scoop for me, but I insisted on the opposite side from where I was sitting, just in case. But then I wonder if he's playing mind games with me and thought I would do that and eventually eat the poisonous side. I nervously eat and answer questions, which I've meticulously prepared for by preparing for it like a job interview, while trying to rid myself of the thought of death. They love that I'm an eater and order more. Shit. Sweating bullets the whole time, having not slept for at least a day because I was so nervous and thinking I might die soon. I actually think I did pretty well. After dinner we go back to their home, and her parents instruct me to stay in their daughter's room with her in it. Is this a trick? A gotcha moment? I think the blowfish poison might have already taken over, so I don't care. My wife thinks it's funny to get frisky and watch me squirm. DM. HS. We just celebrated 3 years of marriage. My girlfriend and I were best friends before we started dating. I'm from Virginia and she's from Oklahoma. I go to school in OK, which made me not want to jump into a random relationship that may not last if it had to become long distance. I ended up meeting her dad because her cousin was having a baby, and me being the soft human I am, wanted to go hold a cute ass baby. So my GF, 3 friends, and I made the drive to the hospital. I had no idea that her entire family was going to be there, but it was fine. I'm usually pretty good around parents. since I totally had a huge ass crush on her, and it was clear to everybody but her that I did. I was trying to make a good impression on her family. I started by trying to talk sports with her dad, which he had no interest in doing. So that was a fantastic start, but I ended up getting along with her stepmom really well. I should picked up on her stepmom telling me how great it is that I'm in touch with my feminine side, but oh well. I get to hold the baby and I'm happy as hell because the baby is cute as shit and I'm enjoying it. Her dad is more of a manly man and didn't really get why I was enjoying it and made it clear that he didn't want to hold the kid despite me trying to hand it off to him. Her dad ended up taking us out for dinner and he didn't really want to talk to me, which is fine. I just talked to her stepmom the whole time. After dinner we were saying our goodbyes, and in proper guy friend fashion, I slapped one my buddy's asses that was there, played football. It's a pretty common thing to do. After I slapped his ass as a joke, I looked up and saw her dad staring at me. I think I was just totally caught off guard, and I just stared back for a second and just nodded and walked to the car. Probably cold made a joke out of it, but I was nervous for some reason. A few days later I was talking to my now GF, and she said that her dad and stepmom were talking about me to her, which I took as a good thing. I thought I made a good first impression. But then it clicked in my head that they definitely thought I was her gay best friend. And they thought that for a while. Even for a little bit, while we were dating. Took a while to convince him I was straight, and I wasn't dating his daughter as a cover up, but we get along pretty well now. So that's how my GF's dad thought I was gay. It's more of a meet the mom horror story I had. In high school I dated a girl that I was nuts about. Like all teens, our hormones were aging, and we'd mess around now and again, and when we weren't together we'd talk dirty to each other on the phone. Went to her house one night to pick her up for a movie, and she said her parents wanted to meet me. Seems reasonable, I thought. Stepdad comes out first. Introductions and small talk happen while we wait on the mom. He seems cool. Eventually the mom comes out and squares up in front of me, noses almost touching, while giving me the most intense stare down I can ever recall receiving. I introduce myself and hold out my hand to shake hers, and she slaps it away, never breaking eye contact. I try to make small talk, and every time she says something she addresses me as Jack, not my name, not even close, very pointedly. After the 5th time I try to politely correct her that my name isn't Jack, it's actually. Before I could finish that sentence, the explosion happened. She erupted like a volcano and starts screaming, "I call you Jack because I think you're a fucking jack off, you piece of shit." Wide-eyed and now stammering, I apologize to her, telling her I've obviously offended her, but I didn't know what I did. That's when she pulls out a tape recorder. It seems she's ultra protective of her daughter to the point she records every incoming call to the house. She pushes play on her recorder and immediately we hear some very graphic discussions about things that have happened and things we'd like to try next. Everybody looked stunned, and I could feel my ears burning from the embarrassment. All I could muster up was a "well, I guess we aren't going to the movies tonight." I was told to get off her property before she did something irrational. I told my GF I'd call her later, and her mom yelled from inside the house, "The fuck you all, Jack." Needless to say, I was single shortly after that. Edit, spelling. I actually have two. First one, I grew up on a farm. I know what a well-kept shotgun looks and feels like. Got my first real girlfriend at 18. First time I met her dad, he'd laid out a shotgun on the table to intimidate/joke with me. I didn't realize this at the time. Where I'm from it's pretty normal to keep a shotgun, or 3, accessible in your kitchen, and I picked it up amazed at how dirty it was. I opened it up, and it was even worse on the inside. I went out to my car and got one of my rifles in my kit. Proceeded to show him how to properly disassemble and clean his shotgun while making small talk. I wasn't invited back as he didn't much like the idea of his daughter dating a man that knew so much about guns. Looking back, when I asked him, "Why do you have this shotgun out?" and he responded, "For you," the correct response was not, "Oh, I can't. Clearly this has been in your family a long time." I'll show you how to clean it so it lasts for your great grandkids. He probably thought I was being a smartass. Second one, I went home with a college girlfriend over a break and met her parents. Stayed at their place and it was nice. They were decent people. Now, I'm not particularly religious and neither was the GF at the time. Towards the end of our trip her father pulls me aside and starts asking me about my belief system, how I'd want to raise kids, etc. I try to steer the conversation away as his daughter, and I weren't that serious, and I was getting some crazy religious-y vibes from this guy. Now, on principle I don't lie. I'll dodge your questions so as to not offend, but I won't lie unless absolutely necessary to save face. His questions were getting more and more specific as to my belief system until he suddenly switches gears and asks if I've had sex with his daughter. Dodge. He asks again. Okay, fine, yes. I thought in that moment was going to kill me. Nope, this guy bear hugs me and half sobs that he thought his daughter would never find a half decent guy after whoring around. As you can imagine, that led to some interesting conversations with the then girlfriend, as I'd been told different, and ultimately the implosion of the relationship. Years later I ran across this same man in a small airport in another country. What are the odds? And genuinely enjoyed catching up. Would have been a perfectly normal interaction had he not, right as we were parting, asked if I ever thought about his daughter in that way anymore. Me and my girlfriend were on a trip to visit their parents. We are a mixed couple, so I was a little nervous. My friend told me to not go to a white girl's house. I guess her mom was a psychiatrist or something. Anyway, everything was going fine. She offered to get me to quit smoking, but I didn't want her in my head. I snuck out to try and smoke one night, and their groundskeeper, big burly black guy, starts running right at me in the dark. I thought he was going to hit me, but he just turned and kept running. Her dad told me he would have voted for Obama a third time if he could. That was weird. Anyways, I'm going back in from my smoke and her mom is there and asks me to sit down. She starts stirring her tea and I just couldn't move. It felt like I was sinking into a hole and looking at the world through a little box, like tunnel vision almost. Next thing I know I'm waking up. Don't even remember going to sleep, but I didn't even want cigarettes after that. There was a sort of party that day. I was pretty much the only black person, except for this other guy who was way too young to be with the woman he was with. Being a photographer, I wanted to remember the occasion, but as soon as my phone flashed the other black guy's eyes gleamed over and he charged me and told me to just leave. I was so shook. Everyone rushed him away and he emerged later just fine. I guess it was seizures. But that was super weird for a seizure. At this point I'm kind of ready to go. I ended up getting hypnotized again, and this time they had me strapped into a chair and showed me this video. They were programming white people into me so they could use our bodies. I escaped the chair, clubbed the brother, and took the mounted buckhead off the wall and impaled her dad. I'm trying to run. Brother jumps me, stab him in the leg, and make my way out. My now ex GF and the groundskeeper Mr. McCroonataga I catch up. He tackles me. I get my phone out just in time and flash him too. He snaps out of it and kills my ex, but then he turns a gun on himself. Just then, a cop car is pulling up. Great. 2 black guys and a dead white woman. I'm so fucked. But it was my friend who had warned me. Luckily he was a SA agent. I just got in the car and left. So I should clarify, I had technically met the dad beforehand, but it was nearly 10 years prior, and I was only 8 or so at the time, so definitely different people then, much more innocent. Anyways, I get interested in this girl in my town. She goes to a different school and we start talking a little bit. Things go well, and my friends give me shit due to the fact that I was a senior in high school and she was a sophomore. Side note, I'm not one of those love is love people, but 18 and 15 is not a terrible difference. Just seems terrible because 15 is considered immature. So we talk for a while and I convince her to leave her boyfriend of 9 months. We routinely begin sneaking around, and her parents were very disapproving of me. Whenever she brought my name up she told me, so we figured it'd be best to just leave them alone and sneak around. Smart high schoolers, I know. After a couple months things got a little serious. She had turned 16 and was driving now, but her parents tracked her phone, so we had to be extremely creative. Leaving her phone at a friend's house, even going into her house when she was home alone, etc. But this story takes place in her bedroom. I'm on Thor, so prior to my first encounter with them, I thought it'd be smart to text them and ask what the problem they had with me was. I was very polite and not aggressive at all. Her mom basically told me to delete the number and never have contact with her family ever again because her daughter didn't need to date her 18-year-old. Also, I know they thought I was a pothead and the truth is I didn't do anything in high school. I tried weed once my junior year and had obviously drank before, but it was not my thing, so I stayed away from both. An important note is my town is small and word travels lightning fast, and I hung out with the party kids. I just did my own thing when they partied. So her dad is in law enforcement, and when he gives MIPs to the kids I hang with I understand him thinking I do the same stuff, but I never got a chance and that's what sucked. So back on track here. After the text message debacle, I basically continue sneaking, and her dad apparently was catching on. Cops are good at that. One night like 8 to 9 months into our relationship we were in her room. Only her sister was home, and mom was out of town. Her dad working, so we felt safe as hell. Anyways we got intimate, and you guys can use your imagination on what basically happened. Literally when we get done I figured that it'd be smart to not push my luck and I wanna get dressed, but she said to me, and I quote, "Don't put clothes on, yet I just wanna make out for a bit." I said I was worried of getting caught. "I don't care if we get caught." She had a hoodie and shorts on, and I only had boxers on. Next thing I know I hear loud yelling and a flashlight down the hallway to her room. He literally storms into the room yelling and screaming about how he knew and how I was a fucking pothead and whatnot. That hurt me, so I yelled back that I wasn't. He told me to get the out and leave her alone. There were a lot of words I'm not typing that he actually said, but you can imagine. Also he was in uniform, so he's all pissed, with a gun, taser, nightstick, and pepper spray. He calls my dad while I'm putting my clothes on, had the number from fantasy football, and starts telling him to punish me and stuff. This was around 11 at night so my dad was tired, and honestly my parents don't care what I do. I have never been in trouble, so I don't have many rules. He just kinda laughed it off, and they hung up. I get home, and my dad just smiles and chuckles, while my mom is pissed he called me a pothead. On the bright side though we are now 27 months in today, and her parents have opened up a lot to me after they gave me a chance and saw I was a good person. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.